At the instruction of the Imperial Senate, Almudin Octistis, the Asavean architect, was engaged to carry out a number of important commissions across the Empire. Despite some requests not to, every building he constructed was decorated with statues, frescoes, and other decorations, proudly displaying effigies of his false gods. Now the Imperial Synod has condemned the architect for heresy, and the Assembly of Pride has issued a clear statement of principle to every proud citizen of the Empire. The statement of principle by the Pride Assembly has had a significant response in those territories where the Asavean priests' idolatrous constructions are to be found. The proud understand the importance of symbols, and many have long felt that these visible signs of a false faith were an affront to the dignity of everyone forced to live next to them. There is a relief that the Asavean priest has been condemned by the Synod. Now action must be taken to deal with the legacy of his actions. The works of Almudin Octistis are an affront to the dignity of the Empire. They denigrate our true faith and demean the pride of every citizen who learns of their existence. We send this priest with 100 liao to urge devout imperial citizens to surround these structures and urge any imperial citizen who tries to enter to turn back. If endorsed, this mandate would cause pilgrims of the way who dwell in Redoubt and Temeshwar to form a ring around the Great Game, the Palace Docks and the Rune Forge, urging every citizen to turn back. Not everyone would listen, of course, but many would be persuaded, enough that all three commissions would cease to function for as long as the protest continued. Although the Senate would still need to pay for their upkeep, maintenance and wages where appropriate. The protest against Lorenzo's legacies would take a different form. These cleverly designed constructions require relatively little maintenance and ongoing work. However, they are dependent on the arrangement of a number of stelae carved of red stone that channel the flows of magic. These stelae were designed by the Wunderkind Guild of Holberg to be adjusted to ensure that they could always provide the best returns no matter how the winds of magic blow. By turning the stelae out of phase, the inhabitants of Temeshwar, Tasato and Hanmark could completely shut them down. The protest would continue for up to a year after the mandate is endorsed, but the Imperial Synod could repass the same mandate at any point in the future to spend a further 100 liao to continue the blockade for another year. There is a much simpler, quicker and more effective step that could be taken. The idolatrous statues could simply be torn down, the frescoes smashed, the mosaics defaced. It would not be difficult to remove them all, but it would be impossible to do so without damaging the buildings themselves. The works of Almudin Octistis are an affront to the dignity of the Empire. They denigrate our true faith and demean the pride of imperial citizens. We send this priest with 25 liao to lead imperial citizens in tearing down these idolatrous symbols of false gods. If endorsed, this mandate would cause a mob to descend on every building constructed by the Asavean priest. The buildings would be damaged in the process, but the defacement would remove every decoration and statue raised in praise to a false god. The buildings would cease to function until they are repaired. Each structure would need a separate commission to repair it. No material would be needed, but it would cost twice the original cost in thrones to repair the damage done. In addition, every territory that contained one or more of Almudin's buildings would see a boost to the pride of local citizens that would last for a year following the action. Congregations in the territory would swell, providing an additional 2 votes in the synod and 1 additional dose of liao to everyone. The exception would be Karsk, where the buildings have already been defaced in this way. Here, the benefits would be an additional 4 votes in the synod and 2 additional doses of liao for every congregation, as people took pride in knowing that they had led the empire with their determined response. Although Almudin designed the fortification in Lestasny, there are no statues to the Asavean deities there. By order of the Boyar of Iversgard, the idolatrous statues were used to gravel the courtyard, so that every imperial boot that entered the fortification would be treading the Asavean gods underfoot. It was a powerful statement, a permanent act of defiance for the Asaveans and their false gods. The works of Almudin Octistis are an affront to the dignity of the empire. They denigrate our true faith and demean the pride of imperial citizens. We send this priest with 50 liao to lead imperial citizens to destroy these statues. Let us follow the example of Ivesgard and create a lasting covenant to show the world the fate of all false religions. If endorsed, this mandate would inspire architects, masons, and builders to force their way into the buildings designed by the Asavean priest. The images of false gods would be carefully and meticulously removed and then repurposed in such a way as to provide a lasting symbol of opposition for the Asaveans and their faith. The buildings would be damaged in the process, though not nearly as badly as if the statues were simply torn down by a mob. They would cease to function until they are repaired, but each building would only need the original construction cost in thrones to repair the damage. As with the earlier mandate, every territory that contained one or more of Almodin's buildings would see a boost to the pride of local citizens. But this bonus would be permanent. As long as the synods maintained its clear stance of opposing idolatry of the Asaveans, congregations in each territory would swell, providing 2 additional votes in the synod and 1 additional dose of liao to everyone. In Karsk, for the next year, every congregation would receive 4 votes in the synod and 2 additional doses of liao for every congregation, as people took pride in knowing that they had led the empire with their determined response. After that, they would continue to receive the 2 votes and 1 liao, just like the other congregations in other places, where the problem of Almodin's idolatry has been decisively addressed. All 3 mandates are in competition with each other. Only one can be enacted. As always, if multiple competing mandates are raised successfully, the one that achieved the highest margin of success will be the one that is considered to have been enacted. There is one other building that would be caught up by any mandate that addressed the works of the Asavean priest. The Temple of Balo and the Black Bull in Feroz was not actually built by Almodin, but rather than being an imperial commission decorated by idolatrous images, it is a literal temple to the Asavean gods. While the Asavean priests who live there have trod a careful line, their merchants routinely conduct their business here, so hundreds of people, both imperial and Asavean, visit a site dedicated to the worship of a black bull every day. It is impossible to rouse people to action against the works of the architect without also inspiring similar action against the temple. If the first mandate were passed, the freeborn would put a cordon in place around the temple, urging imperial citizens not to enter. The benefits enjoyed by the current imperial delegate to the temple in Feroz would be lost for as long as a protest continued. If the second or third mandate were passed, then the temple would be destroyed, and the position would cease to exist. The current delegate is Franco Irigo, a freeborn soutanier. Any action against the temple in Oran will impact local trade and businesses. The temple has become a hub of commerce, with Asavean shipping bringing in white granite to the Brass Coast. There will be a loss of taxation from the territory if this trade is disrupted, either temporarily or permanently. There will also be some local unrest, although there are many proud citizens in Feroz who would be only too glad to see the back of the temple. That view is not ubiquitous. The temple and the priests who live there have become popular with some of the freeborn families who are prepared to overlook their obvious idolatry. The temple has provided valuable benefits to a number of families, freely helping them to secure important trade deals with visiting dignitaries, and a number of families have taken advantage of the priests to teach secrets of architecture and construction to any who study there. The temple also serves as a symbol of good relations between imperial and Asavean merchants. If it were destroyed or damaged, one other likely outcome would be the loss of additional profits in orichalcum gained by those trading in Nemoria. Imperial relations with Asavea are already being impacted by the Liberty Pact, as well as the decision to convict Almodin Octistis for heresy. Any action against their temple and the architect's works will further undermine relations. There are so many elements of imperial policy that are impacting relations with Asavea at the moment that it's impossible to predict what the outcome might be. Likely it would be influenced in part by any explanation provided by the Imperial ambassador to Asavea, but no words would serve to excuse the destruction of the temple at Oran. If that happened, then the Asaveans would be outraged. They would be certain to demand an explanation and reparations to cover everything that was lost and more besides. If Almudin's buildings are not simply destroyed, but actively despoiled, if they are deliberately defaced in ways designed to denigrate the Asavean deities, then the Asavean response is likely to be somewhere between bellicose and apoplectic. The Imperial Senate could also deal with the situation in the same way that they dealt with the fortification in Lestasny, with a Senate motion to alter the commissions removing the idolatrous elements. The Senate can pass a single motion addressing all of the commissions of Almudin in one go. This would require 6 of the Senate's 9 commissions, and would cost 92 thrones and 4 crowns in labour, or 185 thrones if the appropriate mandate has been enacted. It would take 3 months to remove all evidence of Almudin's handiwork. Alternatively, they could address each structure in turn, using a single motion per building and paying the appropriate labour costs for that structure. This alteration work could be done before, after, or during the effects of any of the mandates related to the idolatry. The Senate cannot alter the Temple of Balo. They did not build it, after all, and forcibly removing the status of the Asavean gods would be indistinguishable from decommissioning the structure. They may, however, choose to abrogate their permission for the structure to be built. If they did this, the temple would be decommissioned, the title associated with it would cease to exist, and the temple would no longer have permission to operate as such. It is not clear what would happen to the priests who staffed the temple, however, but the best-case scenario would be that they returned to Asavea. The worst-case scenario would be that they barricade the doors of the temple and have the Empire use military force to remove them. The Iron Khanate does not require the attention of either the Synod or the Senate. While it was commissioned, work in Segura was never begun. The motion used to order its construction has since lapsed, and the focus of the Zemrys Islanders has turned to other things. Here's a short timeline of Almudin's works, deeds, and incongruities. In winter 380, he was hired, and he constructed the palace docks. In spring 381, he constructed the Runeforge in Redoubt, and then fortified Lestasny. In summer 381, he was resting and did not complete any structures. In autumn 381, he constructed both Lorenzo's Legacy of Loyalty in Temeshwar, and also Lorenzo's Legacy of Ambition in Tasato. In winter 381, he constructed Lorenzo's Legacy of Vigilance in Hanmark. In spring 382, he constructed Lorenzo's Great Game in Temeshwar. In spring 382 also, he was commissioned to construct the Iron Khanate in Segura. In summer 382, Almudin was subject to an inquisition. In autumn 382, he was fired from his position and condemned publicly. In winter 382, he was tried and convicted of idolatry.